Hello, everybody. This is Chef Rick Moonen interviewing from my studio in Las Vegas. Here's where we get to dive into deep conversations with some of the original gangsters of cuisine. Ocean Raised is the name of the podcast, where we're all globally connected by the oceans and food cultures that it shares. Today, I get to speak with a man that has certainly been around the world as a fish forager and distributor of the finest known throughout the top tier of the best restaurants throughout the United States. I'm going to start this off a little bit different than I normally do. I don't even have Browne Mitchell, who's the gentleman that I'm going to be speaking with today. It's a name that is just known throughout an industry, and started his company in 1991. And he was influenced to do so. He was originally a wine shop owner, and a lot of things changed when he got a visit from a certain chef that came from France. His name is Jean-Louis Paladin. Understand Jean-Louis, he had a 2-star Michelin restaurant in France, and Condom, France, where he's from. And he came to America, and he found that the products, the things that you can take off the land and the ocean, were as good, if not better, than what he had experienced in France. So he stayed in America. He had a little motor scooter, and he went around and he found the best lamb, and found out that, lamb can taste different from different farms, depending on what they ate in the environment that they grew up in. So I want to read a passage. I'm going to become a narrator, throw on another hat. This is a book called The Third Plate. Dan Barber is a chef and who I have tremendous respect for. Had restaurants in New York and upstate New York called Blue Hill, and Blue Hill at Stone Barns in particular. And when he wrote this book, it's called The Field Notes on the Future of Food. It's an incredible book. Highly recommend that you read it. But I just want to pull a small passage where he talks about Browne Mitchell and his introduction to Jean-Louis Paladin. So bear with me for a second as I go to page 277 and read about. This is a passage where I guess it'll kind of make self-evident. Browne Mitchell is among the most important seafood purveyors in the United States. And though it sounds falsely modest when he insists he's merely a fish picker, it's also true. Rod picks fish for the country's best chefs from Maine to California. It started in 1980 when he met Jean-Louis Paladin. Through a mutual friend, Paladin discovered that Mitchell was a diver. So he went to visit the wine shop in Camden, Maine, where Rod was working at the time. Paladin examined the store, but according to Mitchell, he kept looking out the window. He wasn't looking around for wine. And this is in quotes. "It was one of those foggy, rainy days in Camden," Mitchell told me. "The first thing he says to me, pointing out to the shore, is that it reminds him of back home. He says he bets there are some great scallops out there." I told him he was right about that. Paladin knew at that time of year the scallops would be at their peak flavor. When the Atlantic waters turn cold in October and November, phytoplankton drops on the water surface and falls to the ocean floor. Scallops, like geese, gorge on the excess nutrients that fatten themselves up for the winter months. So this is the best time to get scallops, and Jean-Louis Paladin knew that. The next day, Mitchell dove for scallops in his favorite area of the bay. Jean-Louis took one look at them and nearly cried. In that thick, deep, gravelly voiced French accent, he said, "What else can you get me?" So that started a business and an industry. All of a sudden, we got run over with demand, Mitchell said. It was like Jean-Louis had a front page ad in every chef's morning paper. I kept hiring divers. These guys couldn't believe it. We dove for scallops all of our life, just for fun. And now chefs in New York and Boston wanted to pay us a lot of money to do it. Now, on the menus of countless restaurants across the country, dayboat or diver scallops are well known to be the sweetest and most flavorful of their kind. And this is where it all began. They're among the most sustainable, too. Until Mitchell began paying divers, scallops were almost always harvested by dragging heavy nets along the floor for up to an hour at a time, doing a lot of damage. The divers may yield smaller harvests, but they are more discriminating and less destructive in what they catch. You hand harvest these things, and basically this is the way that you're supposed to hand pluck, things from plants as well as from the ocean. When scallop season ended, Mitchell sought out other fish to sell to chefs. I just purchased the best of everything I could find, he said. I had chefs, the best chefs in America, wanting to know how many scales were on the damn fillet. You couldn't fool these guys. We were always first to bid and the last to bid at the auctions because I couldn't afford not to have the very best stuff. It was the beginning, Mitchell told me, of a specialty seafood business, an outlet for fishermen developed in the same way farmer markets created an outlet for small farmers. Before long, Mitchell was delivering seafood to all 50 states. Even Gilbert Lacause from Le Bernardin, who hadn't been interested in meeting Mitchell until the early 1990s, finally invited him to Le Bernardin. So Mitchell's in Le Bernardin. He brings me into the kitchen, says Mitchell, stares at me, his right eye twitching in the way that he did when he was nervous. If it's not the best fish you have, he said, if it doesn't look like it just came out of the water, my name should never enter your mind. I don't exist. The restaurant would soon become Browne Trading Company's largest single purchaser and remains so today. So today, I get to speak with the purveyor, more than a purveyor. He's a connection. He's basically a savant that brought the finest seafood to everywhere in the United States. And I just want to welcome Rod Mitchell today and thank him for being here and give us a little insight on how he built the business. Hello, Rod. How you doing today? It's such a pleasure and an honor to be speaking with you. I've known you for most of my career, I could say with honesty. And it's an industry that is so much more than just buying things off a shelf, turning them into something and serving them to customers. It's really, truly, from the perspective of the chef, and I know I speak for multitudes of chefs, it's about the purveyor and that purveyor connection with the chef. And you truly exemplify that. I introduced you by reading a passage from Dan Barber's book. And it tells the story of Jean-Louis Paladin and how you started out in Camden at a wine store, and he came walking in and he's staring out the window. He's not even looking at wines because he's like longing for his home in France, in Condom, France, where he had 2-star Michelin restaurant. He came to America. And what kept him here were the products, the availability of those products, the environment that we as Americans really didn't know how to properly, and I don't want to say exploit because it's not exploit, it's the opposite. It's about respecting the environment, going down, hand selecting, pulling out products, and it all started with a bivalve. So Rod, thank you for coming on today. I really, truly appreciate it. How are you today?
I'm good, Rick. It's been a few years since the day of Oceana, of course. I remember you used to beat me up almost as hard as Jean-Louis.
Beat up. It's about, we always want to get the very best, and that's where you come in. You have to be the guy that just has this endless inventory of anything that we need in the perfect size and everything as best that we possibly can. How did you deal with all that? I mean, you were working in a wine store. Some guy with, looks like Al Yankovic comes into your restaurant with these crazy glasses and starts talking to you in this gravelly voice. I'd like to hear the story from your perspective and how those years have progressed into what I consider you being the best connector of seafood, fine quality seafood anywhere in the United States and possibly beyond.
Of course, Jean-Louis, as you know, he was a very intense guy, and he's very serious about what he was doing because he was the first 2-star Michelin chef to come into America and really start what we call the revolution of American cuisine, where things were all beautiful on the plate and people were eating with their eyes as well as their taste. So when Jean-Louis walked into my shop, he wanted to know why I didn't have caviar. And I told him, well, I'd like to have it. And he says, well, I'll introduce you to somebody. And then he also reminded me, this is like my home from Brittany. And there should be products here that I can get from you that are just like what I can get in France. So I said, well, what are you looking for? So, of course, one of the first things he wanted was baby eels, which nobody had any idea what baby eels were, or of course they do in Spain because he's very well versed in Spanish cuisine as well. So we went looking for baby eels. One of the biggest things he started was diver sea scallops. And me also being a diver, I says, well, I think I can get some of those. And I went diving and brought them to him. And he said, this is what I want. So that started the revolution of everybody having diver sea scallops on their menu. Of course, we don't know that every purveyor has them because they only come from certain areas of the East Coast, and not everybody can be a diver. And,
Right.
you know, it helps to sell. So it's one of those things that you sell.
Well, it started a catchphrase that really, it sort of got diluted. It wasn't always a hand-selected diver down, grabbing it and resurfacing. It was more of a scallop that was taken from the shell and not dipped. You know.
Yes, but it was the diver ones at that point. I mean, we used to get them the size of dinner plates, and of course he wanted them in the shell. Mm-hmm. We did ship them to him in the shell, but unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that it wasn't allowed in Maine.
That's what I wanted.
I was arrested for it, but we came to terms and finally learned how to shuck the scallop out of the shell and supply it when it was still moving. So, you know, as when your chef days, when you got scallops from us, they were still moving. And it all has to do with the purveyor knowing how to get the product as fresh as possible from the ocean to the plate. And that was our job to do that. And Jean-Louis always reminded me, if you're going to do something for me, be very serious and make sure that you're not telling stories and that you're getting the absolute best. He says, because I'll know when you're lying to me.
I can so vividly remember that time of my career and the introduction of scallops in the shell. I mean, when I first saw one, I didn't know what the heck it was. All you saw were like hundreds of eyes peeking out from underneath its gaping, by shells, and going in there and seeing, the egg row. So we never see the row, the little sack of eggs that are attached to the side of the scallop. We didn't know what to do with them. I mean, we might as well be given a shad row. But Jean-Louis made it in a manner that really allowed us to embrace it and enjoy it. I mean, first time I had it, I believe, was at Picheline. Remember Terrence Brennan? He was a big supporter of the scallops. Started by Jean-Louis, and the word just started to go from chef to chef to chef. And your name was attached to it because you were the only place to get it. It was just so surreptitious, that the whole thing came to fruition at that point. And what year was that? Do you remember?
That would have been 1986 that things really started to ramp up for the diver scallops. Because I remember my second customer was Daniel Ballud, and I walked into the kitchen at Le Cirque, and he kept me waiting for a while. But when I let him see the scallops and he tasted them, he yelled at me. He said, "Why did you soak them in sugar?" I said, "But chef, I didn't soak them in sugar. That's a natural taste." And of course, he calmed right down. He says, "Okay, I'll start buying them from you." And of course, my biggest test was Andre Soltner. Yeah. So I went to see Andre at Lutece, and he told me, "You'll never show me anything that I haven't seen before." Mm-hmm. I said, "Okay, let me send you some scallops." I sent them to him. He called me up. "You did do it. I've seen something never I've seen before." When he cut them, they could still move. So that was my other customer. But the diver scallop just ran rampantly. We were selling hundreds of pounds a week, just to a few different chefs, from Jasper White in Boston to Jean Georges. I mean, it was a revolution kind of a new wave of what scallops could be. And of course, Le Bernardin finding out that you could have scallops raw was another big thing. And now, of course, Eric Repair is one of our biggest fans for what we do.
You introduced it to Le Bernardin when Gilbert Lacause was still alive. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Gilbert Lacause called me up one day and he says, "You come to my restaurant." And I said, "When?" He says, "You come tomorrow." I said, "Okay." And when I got there, he said to me, he says, "Don't mess around. I will always know if you're lying to me." The same thing that Jean-Louis told me. So we always sent him the best of fish. And I remember when Eric went to work there, Eric Repair, of course, being Jean-Louis' sous chef. Mm-hmm. And Gilbert needed a sous chef, so Jean-Louis told him, "The only man I can send you that I can trust is my own sous chef." So he sent Eric, of course, now as the exec chef. Mm-hmm. But Eric wanted to buy fish from me. And Gilbert said, "No, I have my fish guy. We'll do a test. you order some from your fish guy, I order some from my fish guy. So Eric called me and he says, send me a nice halibut. So we sent him a halibut, and Gilbert was there the next morning when they both had their fish come in. And Gilbert bent over and touched the halibut, and he says, see, I told you, my fish is better. And Eric says, oh, but that's the one that Browne Trading sent. So thus the relationship began there. Now every day, of course, Le Bernardin is fish on the doorstep.
I'm going to go back for a second, because it's intriguing to me that these are the names that you're putting out right now for those that are listening. I want everybody to realize that these were icons, every single one of them. Daniel Boulou, Jean-Louis Paladin, and one of the most talented, naturally talented chefs I've ever got the chance to work with. I didn't work for him, but we did events together, and we became very good friends. We went hunting together, etc. And he could just pick something out of the forest and not just put it in your mouth. He'll take it back into a simple preparation. It blows your mind every single time. There's an epiphany of a watercress, of a mushroom, of a fish, of anything that he picked up. And what I want to get to the bottom of is you were fearless. You didn't know. You just, it's a guy I'm going to go sell some stuff to. You know, you were like selling wines in a wine shop, and this is my interpretation. Stop me anytime. We're just conversing. So you're selling wines in a wine shop in Maine, and this dude comes in, and all of a sudden you're going to your friends, like, you know, the guys that you like hang out with, the guys that you get to go diving with just for fun, recreation. Like, wait a minute, man. These guys are going to pay us to do this? I mean, you must have been the coolest guy on the block at that time, you know?
Well, they loved the idea that they were going to go diving for scallops and sell them in the shell, because they made a lot more money that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were very intrigued with it. And of course, the reason I liked it so much, because I went to school for fisheries or marine biology. I love fishing. I'd been fishing since I could walk, basically. Mm-hmm. Still do it. I'd still rather go fishing and then sell what I catch. But unfortunately, there's not that much time that allows. And
that's my long-term. That's my long-term goal. I'm going to live in Key West. I'm going to open a little shop, you know, a little store, something. I don't know how many seats. My wife and I will probably just run it. I'll go out in the morning, go fishing, whatever I catch. That's what's on the menu tonight. No reservations, because you never know. So I'm not going to disappoint anyone. The price is going to be just enough to cover the cost of the gasoline and the food, the condiments on the accompaniments on the plate, and just live my life, just taking care of people, doing that, connecting with the ocean. To me, that's my dream retirement, whatever that means, if there's such a thing as retirement.
You got to go to Portugal for that.
You know what? Okay. Now you went from a scallop, talking to your friends. Holy smokes, we can make money selling the shell too. This is out of control, having fun. What was the next, products that came into your hands that you started to distribute, that you were becoming this is the inception of the finest seafood purveyor in the world sitting in front of me. What were the next products?
Thank you for that. I think the next thing was okay, well, we have to have more things to sell. And of course, Jean-Louis had a book called the North Atlantic Seafood by Alan Davidson, which was basically like his Bible when he came to America. So he sat and went through every page and said, I can use this, I can use that. So I started to research some of the things we had here in Maine and what can we do with them. Mm-hmm. So the next thing I found was Maine crab meat. The Maine crab meat basically had a really bad reputation because people were not handling it correctly. It wasn't easy to sell, but I had this one lady that could pick crab meat, and she did it all by hand with a little hammer. She had a few little people that were doing it, so all the pieces were whole. So I had remembered that my grandfather called these crabs picket toe crabs. So I thought, I can't sell it as Maine crab meat, so how about peaky toe crab? So I started selling peaky toe crab. Well, that took off like crazy. Then we couldn't get enough of it half the time, and then people had to make pre-orders. So now, if you go across the country, I bet you will find 80% of the menus that have Maine crab meat will say peaky toe crab, from Thomas Keller to Charlie Trotter, bless his soul.
I'm guilty. I'm as well. The little 8-ounce containers. They weren't
8-ounce
full pounds. They weren't full pounds. They were 8 ounce. You took the top off, and on the top it just laid out like little soldiers. The claw meat, the best, the sweetest. And I gotta I'm so sorry wherever I was. Now, maybe it was my restaurant. I just go in and eat it just right out of the container.
That's it. That's lunch.
It was unbelievable. I mean, if you just added like a simple sauce rosé, as they would call it, which is just, it's mayonnaise, a little ketchup added, and some lemon juice and something, dip it in there. Blew my mind.
Jean-Louis was so intrigued by the idea of peaky toe crab. He had to come to Maine to see it again. Mm-hmm. So he came and he brought Danielle, he brought Gunter Seeger, and we went up to the crab picking house. And of course, they had to all pick crabs themselves, and they had a grand time. In fact, they did a magazine article about them doing it, but became really famous. And now you see peaky toe crab everywhere. We're still doing it. We do hundreds of pounds a week. And we have a hard job keeping up with it. My son quite often tells me, how come you didn't patent the name? And I said, well, I guess I didn't think that much at that time. So
that's crazy. So you went from glass eels or baby eels, right? They're the glass eel, right? They could see through them, translucent eels, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're baby eels. They have no ears. They're basically they go from the salt water to the fresh water, and you have to go at night on the highest tide. So what would happen is we'd go and set our what they call fight nets at the beginning of where the freshwater streams met the salt water, and the baby eels, when the tide came in, would start to go up the streams because their life cycle is to grow up in lakes and ponds until they get to be what they call a mature silver eel, and then they go back down the streams and the rivers back to the Sargassum Sea, and nobody knows what happens then, but then the baby eels come back again. It's an opposite from salmon and the other normal fish that do their migration.
Got you. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around your product list, I guess is what I'm trying to see how it expanded. Obviously, George's Banks, you've got unbelievable cod in Casco Bay. Hello, best cod in the world for sure. I mean, when it was,
we're right here where it is.
I mean, this is a fish that if you go further north or further south, it's not the same fish for whatever reason. The Casco Bay cod had shoulders. It was like they had shoulder pads on, and that was all perfect white flesh, flaky, crazy meat. And it had the oil that the flakes would slide off, and it'd be shiny if you cooked it properly.
Still the same.
Did you ever distribute cod? Did you ever? Did you sell cod?
Oh, yeah, we still do it today.
Yeah.
In fact, I just sent some to Danielle. We have an auction right behind us here, so we can go every day that the boats are coming in. Of course, all the fish is displayed with the name of the boat on the end of the tote, and it can be 2 fish, it can be 200 pounds, but we try to buy from the smaller boats. And one of the things we've taught some of the chefs, you got to buy cow-eyed cod. Cow-eyed Casco cod. And why do we call it cow-eyed? Because the eyes are still brown, same as the pigment in their skin, because that's how you tell that it's only 2 days old. If their eyes are white, it's 4 days old.
That's it. No, okay, just so, again, for people that are listening to understand, I had the privilege of years ago sitting in on that auction, and you're not invited, really, if you're not a buyer, but I was sitting with Jasper White, and they're folding chairs, a bunch of guys sitting around in flannel shirts looking up at chalkboards with the names of the boats and what they have on. They haven't even pulled into the harbor yet. They're basically just, here's what we got. And that was the only communication that you had, was just whatever radios they would, and the prices, and everybody would bid it out. It was one of the most exciting experiences I had in my seafood.
You had to hold up a paddle with your number on it.
That's right.
That's mine. 120, 220, and you had the auctioneer. Unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. It's all electronic. You look at a screen and the name of the boat comes up, the amount of fish, and you push the button. At least we still have our display auction where you can go and actually look at the fish and get a lot number, so you're not bidding blindly like many of the other purveyors do across the country. They don't know what they're buying.
No,
so
it's crap.
We see what we buy.
So you mentioned, it was mentioned when I introduced you, I was reading out of Dan Barber's book, that you buy from the top and the bottom of the auction. Explain what that means.
Well, when we say top and the bottom, is top of the trip and the bottom of when the last boat comes in, we want the bottom. We want whatever came last on the boat. So that's usually what they call the bottom or top of the trip. So, if you have a day boat, quite often it's not just a day, it's 2 days or 3 days out there. So he's harvesting, but you can tell what's top of the trip and what's bottom of the trip.
Right. So, okay. So now striped bass, and you, whatever, the point that I'm about to get to is, you didn't just sit in Portland, Maine, waiting for fish to come swimming up to your door. Although that's where you started, you went down after it, and it was
easy to get fish.
And you happen to just live in one of the most amazing fishery areas of the United States and possibly the world. The United States was built on cod. People came over here because of all the cod that were in the Georges Banks area there. So you didn't sit there. You got on airplanes. Talk to me about Spain. Talk to me about New Zealand. Talk to me like what. And now you started your company. Browne Trading started in 1991.
Yeah, Browne Trading started in 91 because I realized that being in Camden was not going to be an area where we could really operate and get trucks and get airplanes and all that stuff to get our fish as fresh as possible. Because when we first started, I actually drove a truck from Camden all the way to Portland to put it on an airplane. And that happened every day. It wasn't an easy day because you would start at daylight and you weren't home until well after dark because you had to buy the fish, you had to pack the fish, you had to ship the fish. So as time has gone along, the revolution of specialty fish is out there. Everybody's looking for something new, or everybody's looking for a better, newer, fresher source. And as the wild has started to disappear, new technology has brought us aquaculture. Aquaculture is absolutely essential. And the reason it is essential is because if we just relied on wild stocks all the time, there wouldn't be any left. Right. So it's been great with the biotechnology that's out there that's allowing us to find other things in the world that can be had in quantity as well as quality, because you have consistency with product that's been aquacultured because you can control its environment, its food, its entire biologically processed. So, and then you actually know when you harvest, so it can go and get processed when you harvest. After it's harvested and processed, it needs to get shipped and it needs to get to the end user as soon as possible. That's our job as a purveyor. We go and find the fish, process the fish, ship the fish, and make sure the chef never has to worry about what he's getting on his plate. We don't want him to worry that, okay, when I get my fish, do I have to look at it? Is it not very good? Well, that's what we do. We take that out. We make sure that the chef gets exactly what he wants. Size is sometimes, now that's even become better because aquaculture, you buy 4 to 5 pound, 5 to 6 pound, whatever they're raising, and you let the chef know this is how much it's going to weigh. So they figure their portion control on all of those things. So aquaculture now, I would dare say, is 60 to 70% of our menu product line. Go and look at somebody's menu. Now you have to judge for yourself, aquaculture. Is this product sustainable? So then you have to get transparent. Okay.
Thank you. You're doing my whole interview for me.
What are the fish feeding? Okay. What is the basis of the food? Where are they raising it? What is the ecological impact on the environment where they're raising the fish?
I'm going to stop you for 1 second because I just want to make a single point here that people don't really contemplate all that often. Fish are carnivores. There's nothing else that you can purchase that's a carnivore. You're not buying lions. You're not buying any other carnivore. Seafood. And seafood, in order to farm raise, needs meat to grow. So you're talking about marine, proteins in order to make their food.
You need protein.
Right.
And what we found is protein is not only just from the fish, but protein starts with phytoplankton, starts with marine algae, okay? Because that's what all the carnivores have to eat fish that started with that one little ingredient. It's what herring eat. That's why you can't go out with a fishing pole and catch herring. You can't catch sardines with a fishing pole. Why? Because they eat plankton. Yep. And unless you mimic the plankton, you don't get them. So they use nets to get them. And the biggest thing nowadays is, okay, let's take ranch tuna. Okay, what are they feeding the tuna? And a lot of people are really against it because they have to go harvest thousands and thousands of pounds of sardines and herring to feed the tuna.
Right.
So is it sustainable? It's all in one's perception. What is sustainable? I like to say, and I'd like to look forward to a time when things become sustainability plus, which means you're not feeding the fish. The fish is in an environment where they can feed themselves on naturally raised food that's there for them. And we do have one project that's like that now. And it is probably some of the best tasting fish we have because it feeds naturally. Yes. And it started with that one product, Plankton Merino.
That's it. This is the beginning of life. This is what absorbs the solar energy, turns it into plants, and creates 3/4 of the covered earth with water healthy. It creates, you wouldn't smell the ocean. You go there, you're, oh, the ocean, it smells so great. It's the phytoplankton breathing. It's exhaling the smell of the ocean. It's such an important component of the health of our world. Not, you know, and even on land, if we don't have the healthy ocean, there's nothing to harvest or grow on the land as well. So talk to me a little bit about this phytoplankton that I'm holding in my hand. I love it, by the way.
Phytoplankton was first started to be used by a chef in Spain called Angel Leone. And he was good friends with Dan Barber. So Dan Barber and he started to work on some recipes, from everything from making pasta to making bread to making sauce work, sauce for oysters, sauce for fish. I mean, the product is totally versatile. But why was it discovered? Because they needed food in an ecosystem in Spain, actually in Sevilla, Spain, for branzino, sea bass, lubina, whatever you want to call it, but they needed a food for the baby shrimp that was growing, okay? So the shrimp eat plankton. Shrimp grow, the bass eat the shrimp.
Right.
It's a total circle, but you need that algae, you need that plankton to grow. And I guess you kind of have to not call it algae because plankton is a living thing.
Right.
So you have some that are all plant-based, some are half, I would say that some are half animal and some are half plant. And then you have algae, I guess, is completely plant.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different kinds. Now we've also found out that through more biotechnology, we'll have different kinds of plankton merino. So you have different colors of algae and plankton, just like you do plants.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have cilantro, you have basil, you have rosemary. They're all different herbs and spices. Well, the ocean has the same thing.
Right.
It has seaweeds. So all these things are the basis of life. From urchins, what do they eat? Seaweed.
Yeah, they eat the algae.
Oh.
No, that's right. Kelp.
Yeah, kelp, seaweed. So plankton, I think that's going to be the way of the future as long as people can learn how to raise their fish on it, and they have to learn how to raise the plankton. Now, the place where they raise the plankton is amazing. They raise it in giant acrylic tubes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they
silos, right?
That's where they started. Well, it's very small. They started, and then they put it into a system that pumps water across a very large flat roof. Okay, so it keeps pumping the water. Well, the algae keeps reproducing. Then they strain it out, put it through a centrifuge, and then they freeze dry it. It's an amazing operation. Now they're doing vitamins with it. They're doing different products like olive oil, jams, sauces, all kinds of things they're doing with this plankton. And, you know, you can find that out with Plankton Merino. If you go to their website, they show many of the products that you can make for that product.
This is a superfood. But this is something that really stuck with me as I was reading the story of this product. And this is through Dan Barber's, narrative. He talked about a relationship. And that was the word that escaped the discussion for decades, I believe. It's a relationship. This environment in Veta La Palma, Spain, is about a relationship. They when he was asked about they have all these birds that come in, the migratory birds that come in and start to feed us the shrimp or anything that the bronzino need, etc. Is that a problem? He just said,
No,
no, it's not
not a problem. It's an ecosystem.
Right.
They know they're going to lose some fish. They know they're going to lose some shrimp. And it's a very diverse ecosystem there as well, because you have horses, you have wild boar, you have all kinds of things that, yes, it's all a food chain. And in the water there, you have eels, you have sole, you have dorade, you have sea bass, you have mullet. They have mullet there that are a very particular kind of mullet called a striped mullet. Dan Barber particularly loves it. It's very hard to sell here in America, but once you taste it, it's like, wow, that's great fish. Well, what they do is
bones. Everybody's afraid of bones. That's why.
Yeah, because it's not the normal mullet. Okay, it's a striped mullet, and it feeds on the bottom of the ponds and keeps them clean. So it's part of this relationship of all the fish and the animals that live on the Vetta La Palma area, and it's a huge place. I mean, if you go, they have 25 ponds of 25,000 hectares apiece. So if you go there, you're not going to walk across it. You're not going to expect to see fish swimming around in little ponds and cement ponds, or even a small ocean pond. I mean, this is a huge place. This is a lake. Each one of these is like a lake. So it's an amazing place. Now, we get fish from Spain every week, twice a week. And when it comes in here, it's barely in rigor mortis. It's as fresh as you can ever get it.
Okay, so I'm going to be Jean-Louis for a minute and say, Rod, it's great. We get it from Spain, Is there an ecosystem that has any kind of equal to Vetta La Palma in the United States or anywhere else in the world through your travels?
My knowledge, no. I don't think there is. I don't. If there is, it's not something I know about yet.
Right.
Of course, we're always researching. And there's still great wild fisheries in the world that are well managed. Portugal being one of those places. I mean, you go to Azores, 450 species swimming around that set of islands. Why is that? It's because they have the current upwelling that's bringing nutrients and everything to that one area. So what is the key of farming fish? Nutrients, protein, natural water, natural food. That's what you need to have a great aquaculture program. This should be
Vetta La Palma should be a required, mandatory training ground for people that are creating fish through an aquaculture system, because they learn about the relationship. And the more that you can embrace the natural relationship, that the world, the ecosystem, it's a system. Everything is interreliant upon each other. You don't pull a piece of your motor out of your car and expect it to run the same. So the system needs everything to jive. And the more that we can study that, and the more we can replicate that in the aquaculture environment, the better it's going to get. And I believe through many decades of being that pain in the ass that would say, hey, aquaculture, not for me. Truly, I was against farm-raised salmon for many, many years.
For the longest time, and some of them are not very good.
Correct.
Because of what they feed them.
And here's the deal. So historically, the seafood industry, distribution level, from the perspective of the chef, because there's a skepticism. What are you trying to do? There's just too much. If I called you up or Purveyor up, let's not say you, I'm sorry. Let's say, look, I need to buy North Atlantic swordfish, but I want it to be harpooned, which I know that you know about. But Purveyor could just poke a hole in a fish and send it out. So yeah, it's harpooned. Huh? Come on, we're moving inventory here. This is it's only got a 2-day shelf life. If you want a harpoon fish, yeah, get the pole, boom, put a hole in it. But that's I'd say that in a kidding way, but that confidence, consumer confidence, the confidence between the chef and the purveyor is very, very thin, and we're all looking to go and call up the candy man. You're the candy man. What do you got for me, Rod? What's going on now? What can help me to evolve my menu? Lent is coming. I need something different. What do you got? And you're supposed to have a bag on the side like you're a Halloween candy giver. Hey, we got this new fish coming out for you, But I want you to explain to me the importance of that relationship and the fragility of that relationship between purveyor and fine dining chef that's going to have to be over the top with you, and what you must have thin skin as thick as leather to be put up, just to put up with me. Never mind the other roster of chefs.
It's not quite as bad as it used to be, because we do have some consistency in the farm-raised fish, of course. But, you know, this trust and relationship is really important for a purveyor to have with a chef. And I think this one of the things we did start back in the 80s is that as other purveyors came into the mix and understood fine dining and what the great chefs wanted, I think the relationships between purveyor and chef got better. I mean, I was not the only one. I was one of the better ones, I'd like to say, and certainly one of the foremost. But it really grew the industry in not only wild fish selection, but also in trusted aquaculture products. Now, when I say aquaculture products, there are some, as you know, I would never touch. Same with you. It's still going on. It goes on from every country in the world. Aquaculture here. Where does your branzino come from? Where does your dorade come from? Mm-hmm. Do you know? A lot of chefs don't know. They just go from what the purveyor tells them. But any purveyor can tell you a great story. Yeah. You have to have a purveyor that you trust. And I know very well that a chef can really shoot holes in you if he's become really educated, because a long time ago they weren't educated as well as somebody like Jean-Louis. Right. You do not pull anything over on Eric Repair or Thomas Keller. And I've worked with them for years, so that relationship of trust and knowing what I'm telling them is the truth, and when they get what we tell them we're selling, they trust that that's what I have, and that's what they're putting on their menu. So that relationship of chef to purveyor is extremely important, and how you show yourself and how you take care of the quality and how you give service is what's going to create that relationship. You got to go, oh, I remember Jean-Louis, don't ever do anything for me if you're not serious. Be serious at what you're doing. If I didn't get something when he wanted it, when he needed it, I remember many times him hanging up saying, no more business for you today. And I'd worry. But then he'd call me back, of course. He'd want something. Okay, what else are you going to find for me? So
they always come back.
It's always the product sheets. I mean, and now the aquaculture is just, it's a lot of fun up here in Maine from the shellfish world as well.
Oh, yeah.
We probably have, I dare say, 75 or more oyster farms in Maine. Mm. And now we also have mussel farms.
Which is great.
It keeps growing. Now we have scallop people. People are growing scallops in nets and suspended lantern nets. Mm-hmm. Growing what we call butter clams. That's a new one. In fact, I have to remember to get some of those. You'll like those. You know what vongole are, right?
Of course. Yeah, the tiny ones. They open up really quickly when you cook them. That's what I like about it.
In fact, I'm making a note right now because I got to get some. Some guy just told me he's successfully started to grow them, and I want some. I'll send you some, Rick. But all these new aquaculture projects that are coming on are really exciting to see what people are doing, because they do want to work with the environment. And that's another great thing to see, that people want to work with the environment. They don't want to just destroy it. I mean, our lobster industry here really isn't a wild fishery. We're feeding lobsters. I mean, they've proven, set a lobster pot, okay? Pull it up the next day, your lobster's too short. Throw him back. Chances are the next day you come back, he's right back in that trap eating again. So we're feeding lobsters. We have a giant lobster aquaculture program here going on in Maine. That's why our catches keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, so, and you've also helped to eliminate their number one predator, the cod. You know,
well, and the striped bass. And then they also found out something about sea urchins. If you catch too many sea urchins, the sea urchins allow another habitat to exist of the green crab. Green crabs eat baby lobsters. Mm-hmm. So then you don't have as good a lobster program. So now you have a very limited fishery on people getting live sea urchins, because Japan is always hungry for uni. And same in America right now. We sell hundreds of trays.
Santa Barbara.
it's very well controlled, because one part of Casco Bay may be open for 2 weeks, and then they'll close it, and then they'll open it somewhere else, so that all the urchins don't get harvested out of one area or another to hurt the lobster program. I love to see these programs, not only in fisheries management, but also the new aquaculture programs that are related to the fisheries management. Somebody's trying to grow urchins even, I think, now.
Yeah, I think that's, well, it's an integrated multitrophic aquaculture, IMTA, where you're farming something that's beneficial. So you have a effluent, which is the byproduct of a really concentrated farming environment. There's a lot of feces and dead fish and uneaten pellets that can get together, and it creates a super nutrient rich to the point where it's actually toxic to the immediate environment. But if you're farming kelp next to that and you're farming mussels next to the kelp, they're all on different levels of the food chain, but they interact. And that's what's most exciting to me is, and I go back to Veta La Palma, you should study how nature does it on its own. And there's your answers. It's not chemicals. It's not that. How does Veta La Palma deal with parasites? Doesn't have to.
Biotechnology. Now look what's happening in the caviar business. Remember when you used to have the Russians, they'd come to your door, or you could buy the best Iranian caviar in the world? That was all wild. Well, not anymore. It became an endangered species. So now all the caviar you have is farm raised. And some of these guys that are raising farm caviar, they have their secrets, boy, because some of them is much better than others. And it's because these bioscientists that study, say, one species, they really figure out the biology of that particular fish. It's like, there's a lot of people raising caviar right now, but not all of it's very good. And, so now we've been searching, okay, what's the best farm? I go to the farm, see what they're doing, see what their practices are. Is there any kind of smell? Is it, what are they feeding the fish?
What's the average age of a sturgeon when it harvests its eggs to become the best?
Well, that's the other thing we asked them. Are you giving your sturgeon hormones? Which I won't mention farms. Or farms that give their sturgeon hormones. Why? Because they want the fish to grow large quickly, so they don't have to feed them much and have so much invested in that fish before they have eggs. The average time for a good farm-raised sturgeon is 12 years.
12?
Okay.
That's insane.
Siberian sturgeon, about 8 to 10. But I've heard of people giving them hormones that can get sturgeon to size in 5 to 6. So that, to me, what are they doing? We got Frankenfish here, So we really look at where our caviar has come from, how they're raising that sturgeon, because let's face it, these are the fish that lay the golden eggs.
Yes, literally.
And we have farms that are just so good at what they do. You get perfect caviar, and you don't worry about it. And now, of course, there's no wild caviar allowed in Russia or Iran to be imported or exported because of CITES. And CITES is the Convention for Trade in Endangered Species that goes with anybody who's got ivory or tigers or anything that moves over international borders has to have a CITES permit. So in order for them to keep the black market caviar down and from over-harvesting, whenever I buy caviar from any farm, it has to have a CITES permit. But not only does it have a CITES permit, it has a labeling permit, so that every tin is weighed with a number and it goes on a labeling invoice. So when it comes to America, Fish and Wildlife looks at it and checks to make sure that it's right, and then they clear it, and then it has to go to the government to be cleared. So it's a very tough business right now.
Yeah. So chain of custody and an authenticity, and like making sure that it's coming from where you say it's coming from, and it is what it's labeled to be. That's got to be. That transparency is one of the most frustrating things.
Caviar is the worst in the world. Try to go and buy caviar from some companies. Try some of the most popular ones, and tell me what their label tells you. They won't tell you very much. Okay?
Malo soul.
Yeah. So what do we do to limit that? Every one of our caviars has the name of the farm, and it's co-branded with the same logo. And it has a number on it, so you can actually go right back to the farm and see when it was harvested and where it was harvested, the age of the caviar, everything. We like to tell the story. Telling the story is extremely important.
Hallelujah. It's so that's we're talking. I could sit here for hours talking to you about seafood. We could just pick one species apart. Cobia. I love cobia, but you can't find it on the market because they don't swim in school.
They're fun to catch.
Oh well, yeah. Now, you're a big fisherman. Do you go anywhere? Where's your favorite place to go? Do you have a bucket list of places that you want? I mean, have you been to?
Well, I have two places. I love fishing right here in Maine, of course, because I have my striped bass haunts. Mm-hmm. Of course, we can always go and catch codfish and haddock. I've been a bluefin tuna fisherman because I really believe in the rod and reel stuff that goes on here. One fish per day, per boat, has to be rod and reel. You got to tag it. It's got to be counted. Need to make sure we're not over harvesting the fish. It's a good population here. My other place is Stuart, Florida. I have a friend there where we can catch, red snapper, cobia, permit, and I like to go there during the winter because, let's face it, my blood's thinning out, and my dear wife does not and will not put up with cold. I think it was one of the stipulations when I married her, even though she didn't say it out loud. You got to take me someplace warm in the winter. So,
he's coming.
We spend a lot of time in Portugal as well, but I haven't been fishing there. We do bring a lot of fish there. It's still some of the highest quality in the world because of the way they manage their fisheries there. It's extremely, they put it on a plane, they buy it on auction at night, they pack it overnight, it goes on a plane first thing in the morning. It's in Boston for me at 1:30 in the afternoon. Now, you can't get any fresher fish than that. And if you go to Portugal, every little town that's on the ocean has their own little auction, and it's all a display auction. It's back like olden times when you're seeing these really small boats going out. They might have 5 St. Pierre, 2 wild turbot. They don't have very much. No. So, but that's why it's so expensive.
And now that's another thing, in the United States. I think back, like when I was growing up, I was born in 1956. So in the 60s and 70s, my mother cooked. We had seafood on Fridays. It was a Catholic thing. So my mom would make, the menu would rotate from broiled salmon, the swordfish steaks, skin still on them, and fish sticks. That was about the trio of things that we were eating. America didn't know anything about seafood. It was all about, if you look any old cookbooks up in the U.S. Documents of recipes for seafood, they were all overcooked casseroles. Overcooked, everything was overcooked, first of all, and it started at La Bernardin and Gail Green, falling in love with them and writing about it. And again, it's all how it's connected. And so now people started to see, you can eat tuna medium rare, and it popularized the sushi. And of course, I'm at Oceana, while La Bernardin is like, churning out these vast discoveries and epiphanies that are being had by, the people who were going to these restaurants and affording these luxuries. And I got to feed off of that, reinterpret it through the American eye. And what an amazing time to be where I was for me, and to have purveyors like you. The Midwest, they've got lakes, and there's just so much pike perch that you can serve in so many different ways, because it's really, right. So thank God, they could, like Charlie Trotter. How did you end up having a relationship with Charlie Trotter and Rick Tremonto and these, these chefs that were
Charlie certainly was a character and another one of these icons of bringing on fine cuisine with seafood. Because remember, he called me up one day and he said, my name's Charlie Trotter, and I want to buy your seafood because I know Jean-Louis buys seafood from you. And I said, well, I don't know who you are. And he says, well, I'm Chef Charlie Trotter. And he says, what do I have to do to get seafood from you? And jokingly, I said to him, I says, well, you can put $10,000 in an account for me, and I'll start working for you. He says, it'll be there tell me what your bank account number is. And sure enough, he wired $10,000 to me, unbeknownst, he didn't even know me really, other than he wanted what I did. So we started working with Charlie. He was one of my biggest customers. We did some work together on a couple of books.
Yep.
Charlie has a great seafood book, which he patronized me quite well in there, and came here and did a lot of pictures. And I know he wanted to take pictures of my favorite fishing spot. I made him reverse the picture so nobody could figure it out. So
you're all the same. But again, and I'm going to reiterate it because I like to sum it up a little bit, because here we are. We're at a precipice of 60% of seafood that's being consumed in the world globally is coming from farms. Now, to put everything in some better perspectives, a lot of that is shellfish. A lot of that is shrimp. You got oysters, clams, mussels, everything. And that's a category on its own. Fin fish, though, has gone through rocky grounds, tough times. When I say tough times, they had to have make mistakes in order to learn is probably the best way to say it. I mean, even in they were farming it out of the Bay of Fundy. So northern Maine is part of the Bay of Fundy area, and they're farming salmon, and the salmon end up with lice, and they have to get rid of these lice, so they put this stuff called slicer, and they use this slice, and it removes all of it kills the crustaceans that are louse. A louse is a crustacean, and guess what else is growing there that's very popular in Maine? Lobster. So it would also kill the lobster. So they made mistakes. They learned from them. They paid the fines and they moved on. Some companies adopted it and made a better business model sustainability-wise, and some did not. But today, because of these discussions, because of people educating themselves a little bit more, chefs alike, but chefs also, we have to serve to a customer, and a customer needs to understand why, if you're charging $30 rather than the guy down the block charging $20 for a dish, that there's a big difference from where it's from, the story behind it, the connectedness, and the relationships. Where is that? There's a couple of things this is written about you, or maybe this is you. People I know have an interest in discovering something new and unique that nobody else has, Mitchell says. It's this interest that connects us. It's the interest. It's in the intrigue and the storytelling and the transparency and feeling as though you really have a relationship. I know you're not lying to me. You wouldn't dare lie to me. How do we get that embedded into a company that provides you seafood? In other words, a new aquaculture. What is it that you need in order to present a new product to this level of chefs? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you're saying in very few words. For me to embrace a new product, especially aquaculture, I need to know it from the inside out. And then when I start with it, the chefs that I work with will believe in it. Mm-hmm. If I introduce a fish to Eric and he tastes it and he likes the flavor of it, he wants to know everything about it before he starts to buy it. And you as well would want to know everything about an aquaculture project. Where does it eat? Why is it good? Where does it come from? And nowadays you even have to think about, where do the baby fish come from?
That's very true.
Are they being manipulated? Because some of the things that happened when people were just starting aquaculture project, it happened here in Maine. They started the salmon farms. Well, a lot of the salmon that they brought in were not indigenous to the state of Maine. It wasn't an indigenous fish. Okay, so some of those salmon, because they're salmonids, got out of the pens. And what did they do? They bred with the wild salmon. Mm-hmm. Well, the wild salmon have great, ability to survive, to go into the ocean, to go into the streams to spawn. Well, these farm-raised salmon had nowhere near that ability to do that. So it really endangered the wild salmon to the point where we can't fish for them anymore. It's forbidden for you to fish for them. When I first started Browne Trading Company, you were allowed to go fish for Atlantic salmon in the rivers in the spring, and you were able to keep 2. Then it was 1. Then it was all catch and release, and now it's not even catch and release. You're not allowed to touch them because their population has gone down so much because of the interbreeding of the farm-raised fish.
Dilution.
So one of the biggest things people have to look out for is you got to be careful what you're introducing into the environment.
Yeah. Well, especially salmon's is so unique because
salmonids are, that's a problem.
They have certain cycles that they have to have a navigation system beyond anything. Forget GPS. They know how to find the river that they grew up in after living years out in the wild and eating as much krill as they can. But they can't do that if their DNA has been affected by some wayward salmon that got out of a net. Besides, and we can also talk about the copper antifoulant and all of that kind of stuff messing up the navigation system. But this is so true. It's understanding these relationships, having the stories to bring the relief and the value that it brings to you. I mean, phytoplankton is not cheap. I'm going back on that for a second, but it's like saffron. It's like all the expensive things in the world. You don't need tons of it. Well, you need tons of caviar, sorry, but that's different. But when you're using something like this phytoplankton, the marine phytoplankton from one of the most, well, as far as I know, the healthiest ecosystem in the world. I mean, I don't have any story to tell you that I can dispute the Veta de la Palma story, and I want everybody.
Well, you have to go.
I do.
Let me know when you're ready to go.
I'll be ready in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I would be ready. I love Sevilla.
Well, like you said, submerging yourself, getting the real story, having your own personal testimony, looking you in the eye, Rod. I know you're telling me what's the real deal. You'll tell me if it's not the right thing, This has nothing to do with what I just said, but I've been curious and wanted to ask you, how many different types of caviars do you carry right now?
Caviars?
Caviars, yeah.
Oh, God. I think we're in a couple of dozen now. And I do limit them because there's a lot of people that try to sell us caviar from this farm, that farm, and it's like, you can only have so many different kinds, and people keep starting farms, from Poland to Romania. I mean, there's all these different places, and some of them you don't even know if are legit. They may be catching wild sturgeon, putting them in a pen and taking their eggs. We do know of that happening in certain countries. So, that's why I say, we go and we taste, we look, we need to find out everything about it. It's like I remember with the Veta La Palma fish, Dan Barber says, you have got to go there. You got to go see this for your own eyes before you can understand it. And I went a couple of times, and just hung out with Miguel, who's a biologist there, and just watch and learn what they're doing there, because once they get it started, it's more or less just monitoring what's happening, just watching what's happening and learning from what's happening, because nature will teach you. It will teach you unless you start to manipulate too much. And then you have to be careful. If you manipulate, you better have a good biosynchronicity. You need to have biosynchronicity to have a good aquaculture product. And as long as you follow those rules that Mother Nature has given you, you will have a great project and a great fish.
I agree. And so I'm going to start to wrap things up a little bit here, but it's all about transparency. It's about doing it right. It's about learning from nature to create solutions to things that, and all things will always go one way or the other. So how do we keep them in the middle? How do we tip the puppies back in the box, creating the perfect growing environment and getting the story out? So that the value of that, because to buy a bronzino from the Veta de la Palma, you're going to pay more. You're going to pay more because a percentage was taken by birds. But if those birds didn't come, they wouldn't have added their portion of the participation in the ecosystem, which is leave it alone sometimes, But when you're trying to feed the planet, you have to study from how it would work if you weren't around touching it. What would happen in this situation? And then that becomes your solution.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing.
A lot of I think a lot of the farm raising right now, and of course salmon has gone through this. First thing people start doing in a restaurant that really isn't looking for, I would say, the quality of the fish. What is it you ask? What's the price? Right. That's the first question. What's the price? Well, if you go and buy regular Branzino, you probably pay $8.95. You go and buy Vettel Palmer Branzino or Lubina, you're going to pay $12.95. And trying to tell a chef the difference between that, they have to understand the flavor of the fish. So once they try it, I remember when we first started with it, people laughed at us. There's no way you're selling that fish. Nobody's going to buy it. It can't be that different. Well, yeah, when you taste it, it is that different.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you've been eating cardboard that tastes like chicken all this time, and now you have something that really tastes like a sea bass. So,
well, that's because they're eating the the phytoplankton.
They want food cost.
You can taste the smell of the ocean in the flesh of the fish in the most clean possible ways possible. And please cook it on the bone, because the texture of it and everything is so perfect. I get excited by seafood. You are the candy man. You continue to be the candy man. Always remain.
Thank you for those words. They call me a lot of things here. And chefs, I don't have any real bad customers. It's really great to work with the chefs we have now, and they're really struggling, as you know, right now. It's a really difficult time for everyone, from trying to move fish. For me to move fish out of Europe right now, it's very difficult, just because of the COVID and reduced schedules in airlines and people being able to work close together. I mean, it's really difficult. Here in my plant, I'm isolated in a room. I have to go through production areas with a mask, and everybody has to be tested every day. I mean, and everybody's taking temperatures. It's difficult. I hope it goes away soon.
Well, I have a bottle of wine over here I want to share with you. I want to take it up and visit with you, and we can.
The 82 I know is spectacular. Now, a short story for you.
Yeah.
When I was learning with Jean-Louis, and of course, oh man, he used to make me mad, because he did a book with me, which I think you remember, Cooking with the Seasons, was the first coffee table book that you would ever see. And I remember telling my wife, when she saw the book, she says, nobody cooks like that. I said, well, probably not. But when we went to Jean-Louis' restaurant, everything came out, looked exactly like the book. And I said, holy shit. We did work pretty hard to get that book put together. But, he stayed with me for 2 whole summers to do that book. And Fred Maroon, his photographer, was brutal. I mean, it would take him 1 whole day to do 1 picture. I mean, and he would have to stage it all the time. And when I remember back then what a pain in the ass it was, but I was really privileged to be able to live with Jean-Louis and get his thinking and get his calmer about what this was going to be all about, to be in the seafood business, to supply him. And taking the pictures made me really realize that this is really something different. And now, after all these years, after he's passed, I still have the vision. One of the best visions was, we're catching baby eels, and here he is. We've got the nets, and we're trying to get the eels out so we can sell them. And here's Jean-Louis down here with his little clay dish. He's got a fire going on the side of the bank, and he's got his little clay dish and his peppers and his oils and stuff. And he's here yelling at us that he needs to get some so he can cook and eat it. So here he is, cooking it on and I can still see him dipping with his fingers, eating them, and it started a whole revolution with the baby eels. And now, of course, baby eels, when I first sold them, they were $12 a pound. They went up to 25. They were at 50. Now they're at 3,000. And why are they so expensive? Because Spain and all these places have forbidden the sale of the baby eels, because the eel itself has become endangered.
Right.
Because there's been so much harvest for the Asians and Chinese to have baby eels in their farms, because they need unagi.
Right.
So they're all here in the United States. As soon as April hits, they're here with their cash, and sending baby eels through the airlines and stuff is really an art. I've done it, but it's no longer is it a food for these baby eels, because you're not going to eat $3,000 worth of a pound of baby eels. That's craziness. Wow. Jean-Louis would roll over in his grave.
Well, we're evolving. We're learning. It's exciting. I'm not standing on the stove like I used to be. I'm 64 years old now. So I'm trying to be an influence on the future of our food and the confidence that goes along with the food and the products. And Jean-Louis having the insight to meet up with you, push you into the water with your gear on to come up with those shells. It's just, that will always be a memory that's embedded in my career that I carry with me. And it's what gives me confidence about going forward and having companies like Forever Oceans that are really listening to these stories, really taking it seriously and putting the story out before the product. And hopefully next year, sometime we'll get to taste some interesting fish together, Rod. And I promise you that bottle's got your name on it. You and I are going to share it sometime.
Just keep it cool. It's a great bottle.
No, I keep it at 55. Promise you that. That's
but I'm really intrigued with the new technologies that are coming out, and it does take a team of people to figure out, okay, how do you make the best in swimming aquacultured fish selections? I mean, I'm excited to work on something like that. I have a lot of ideas in my head, and I've seen a lot of different aquaculture projects in the world. As I said, the one that you like as well is the Veta La Palma project.
Correct.
But we should have some fun the next few years.
This isn't the last time. I'm not done with you, Rod, and you're not done with me, my friend.
No, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Wow. You've been a fascinating interview. I could go on forever and ever, but I don't want to. I try to keep it to about an hour. So I just want to thank everyone that's been listening. I want to thank Forever Oceans for sponsoring this Ocean Raised podcast. I get to speak with amazing people like you, Rod. You're definitely one of the original gangsters. You probably don't consider yourself that, but I'm like you alluded to it. The guys that live in your area, I'm going to talk to them. I want some stories. I'm going to get some dirt on you. Don't worry about it. Rod, thank you so much, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Have a terrific.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
All the best.
ForeverOceans.com